Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Surah Bani Israel, chapter 17, verses 71 to 77 will be covered today. Being blind in this life leads to staying blind in the hereafter. There is a verse 72, and it needs a bit of extra explanation. So we should have some interesting discussion today in our question answer session. These are the references. And this is our contact in case there is any query, question regarding this presentation or any of our previous presentation. This contact can also be used to get in touch with Lu Islam. Recap verses 66 to 70. Here the Quran has referred to human efforts to seek the means of sustenance on planet Earth, for which he employs ships sailing across the ocean. We construct ships using the available resources on land and make use of our intellect and knowledge. This is part of the process of Rububiyat, which is there to provide nourishment and development to mankind. During this process of making efforts by using ships and oceans, we draw the benefits of Allah's laws and sail across the waves safely by obeying these laws. However, instead of appreciating all the arrangements of sustenance made available on this earth for mankind, we do not reflect and pay attention to the higher purpose of life and thus display kufr. And Quran calls it blindness if we don't pay attention to signs all around us, because we are provided with intellect and reasoning power, so we are expected to use it. By observing the physical laws of Allah and by taking precautions, we manage to protect ourselves from storms and tornadoes, and this minimizing of risks makes it possible to undertake these journeys over land and sea repeatedly. All this is part of the planning of Allah in the domain of Khalq. Indeed, Allah has created each child of Adam deserving of respect and dignity, and this is the inviolable right of every individual as a human being. Man, by virtue of possessing choice and intent, has a superior status over many of Allah's creations. And we went through some of these aspects, that what is given to us in terms of our choice and intent and also intellect and reasoning power, we can grow out of our existing position and using the permanent values of the Quran and become mu'mineen, who can then carry out all the efforts to establish the system of deen in the world. An overview of today's presentation. The results of collective human deeds appear in this world on a continuous basis. The world of 2024 is based on all that has happened in the past few centuries, and we can easily figure this out in the light of the functioning of the law of requital. Allah does not do injustice to mankind. It is human beings themselves who create problems for themselves. The law of Allah is that those who choose to remain blind in this life will be raised up blind in the life of the hereafter, i.e., the state of their self in which they left this life at the time of death. They will rise in the same state in the life hereafter. This can be easily figured out by understanding the Quran and its value system. This is not otherworldly. The state of development of the collective selves in the world can be evaluated using the criteria noted in the book. When Quran calls human beings as blind, that means they are not using their potentials in this life, and hence they cannot bring out their best. It is not to create fear. The Quran is actually explaining the procedure and the reason for creation of man, so that he can become a better human being and then can qualify for the life of the hereafter. So that is the way we should look at it. People who do not like the message of the Quran use all kinds of tricks and tactics to oppose it. However, if mu'mineen remain firmly on the path of Allah, then success is bound to come in their direction. This is an immutable law of Allah. The path of those who rise up for the cause of Allah is described in the Quran, and since the laws of Allah are immutable, help materializes in direct proportion to their efforts. Now let us go to the first verse of today's presentation, 1771. questioning the functioning of the human world. Yawma nad'u kulla unasin bi imamihim faman utiya kitabahu bi yaminihi faulaika yakrauna kitabahum wala yuzlamuna fatila. But man is neither defined by merely his physical body, nor is the physical universe the sole domain for his activities and successes. Other than the animalistic life, there is also his human life, which is defined according to his deeds. At the time of the manifestation of the outcomes of deeds, all human beings are called together with their scroll of deeds. The one who has his scroll of deeds in his right hand, which is a symbol of success and eminence, these people read it joyfully and find the full recompense for all their deeds in it. There is not an iota of reduction to be found in it. Elaborating this verse further, here the Quran has invited us to imagine a scenario where everyone is present together with their leaders whom they used to follow, and they will be handed their scroll of deeds. If these deeds had produced positive outcomes, then they will receive these in their right hands. This is a phrase used to indicate that the scroll has a positive outcome. They will go through their scroll of deeds and will find that what they had sent forward resulted in joyous outcomes. And over here, the Quran has mentioned only the positive side of human deeds. Elsewhere in the Quran, it has also mentioned the evil side of human deeds. The interesting part is that this scroll will be a written one, written by their own selves, and whatever we write in the physical world, we do it deliberately and we know exactly what we have written. There is no ambiguity in it. And that is the beauty of this aspect, that whatever Quran is saying is that we have done it and we know that we have done it. Whether we forget it, that's another matter, but our memory will then support it. To assure us further, the verse concludes by stating, Wala yuzlamuna fatila. This scroll makes it clear that no one can be treated unjustly, because we have done it ourselves. We have written it down ourselves with our own hands. As nothing will be omitted, what we ourselves write through our deeds simply cannot be unjust. We did it, hence we'll know what we did and how we lived our life. If we relate this to today's world by stating Yawma nad'u kulla unasin bi imamihim, we are always in an era in which we witness the sum total of the deeds of everyone from the past. So if we apply this verse to this world, then all of us are together and witnessing what is going on in our world of today because of what human beings collectively have done in the past. The world of 2024 is created by human beings of the past, for example, 100 years. Actually, it is spread over much longer than that. We can stretch it as far back in the past as necessary in terms of the impact on the world of today. For example, the colonial past. And colonial past, we can look at it from the West point of view. But if we look at the Muslim world, we can probably look at over 1,000 years of decline and status quo and inertia with which the Muslims are suffering. Now, next verse, 1772, defining the meaning of human blindness. وَمَنْ كَانَ فِي هَذِهِ أَعْمَى فَهُوَ فِي الْآخِرَةِ أَعْمَى وَأَضَلُّ سَبِيلًا. I think we should try to memorize this verse along with some other salient verses, because this is a good reminder to all of us that we must not be blind in our day-to-day living in this world. And of course, through the Quran, we are trying to gain as much sight, as much vision as possible. Do not think from this that the outcomes of human deeds only appear in front in the life hereafter. Not at all. The outcomes of deeds also begin to appear in front in this very life. The outcome of balanced conduct is also the prosperities of this world. This is that tangible criterion from which it can be seen whether the deeds of some nation are in accordance with the laws of Allah or not. If it possesses respect and ascendancy, then its deeds are according to those laws. If it is living a life of humiliation and disgrace, then it is contravening them. Remember this principle that anyone who is blind in this world, he will also be blind in the hereafter and totally astray from the path. This is because life is but one continuously flowing stream. Now, what I've done over here is that before I go over to explaining this verse, I drew five aspects of what we observe in the word, those who come to the Quran and try to get something out of it. Thematic of different approaches to the Quran. The first is we observe it in the religious domain, individual salvation and religious belief system. People approach the Quran with a view to get some benefit for themselves individually. Whole edifice is based on ritualized beliefs from forefathers, blind beliefs, abstract concept of sawab. And all these are a kind of blindness that we are not getting that benefit from the Quran which it is meant to give us. This sectarian version of Islam serves as a hindrance on the path of deen, turns the world into living hell, because they were the ones who were supposed to become Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen and establish the system of deen. If they ignore all these aspects, then obviously the good factor in the world will disappear. This is the state in 2024. Some people of the book also take interest, they read it as a religious book. Because if Muslims do not get benefit out of the Quran and understand it, then who is going to explain it to others? Second is that category of people who study the Quran to gain knowledge, to confirm their own religious beliefs and choose what suits them. Deen as a system never crosses their mind. So they are there, they come to the Quran to verify their own beliefs. And they can have any kinds of belief, even secular beliefs, and they come to the Quran, pick up the verses which suit them, and then say that the Quran is confirming their own belief system. People have also created platforms to earn money through YouTube channels, a lucrative business. The Quran has pointed to this aspect. I came across one advertisement where a guy with a beard says that so-and-so has established a tremendous business and we can help you to develop your own business. And what they are doing is, because all these religious folks are in majority, so they sell what they like. Academic interest, for example, non-Muslims, mainly through translations. Nothing comes out of this work, no help for the poor. And I've come across a lot of people who are academically coming to the Quran, but their problem is that they try to get understanding through translations, and also they go to the hadith literature, and when they mix up together, it is a total mess. Opponents also study it in order to ensure that people do not come to the Quran, also divert Muslims from the path. And these are the intelligence agencies in the West who are doing it, and they study it and they know that what is in it, and they do not want people to come to the Quran as a system. Fundamentalism is promoted. Also, sectarian versions are promoted. Divisions are exploited. Jihadi groups have been created. And we all know that what kind of these groups are and who is sponsoring them. And the last is study as an alternative system to find an answer to the issues of life. Volunteer to pursue this path in order to establish the system of deen. Tulu Islam is the only organization in the world which vouches for the system of deen based on the pure Quran. And with that in mind, we should continue studying the Quran and see that how things will develop in the future and what is going on in the world of 2024. Now, further reflections on this verse 72. This verse merits a long pause and reflection on our part, as the Quran has presented the true reality of our existence as human beings before our eyes. We are made responsible for the choices we make and their impact on the world we create. The first part of the verse states, وَمَنْ كَانَ فِي هَذِهِ أَعْمَى. Whoever is blind in this world, that is in the present physical life, this is blindness acquired through our own volition, i.e., we willfully desire to ignore all the signs to which the Quran has invited our attention, physical as well as within our psyche. Those who have impaired sight cannot make use of the light in the physical sense and are thus unable to be fully functional compared to those who can see. If we have a physical blindness, then of course they have a limited role to play in the world, and they have a lot of hardships to face. But those hardships are faced by those who have failed to establish the system of deen to take care of their disability. So that is the point I'm trying to make over here. For them, sunlight does not exist, and there is a need for a system which can help them navigate this life. This is the responsibility of those who have sight, i.e., can see physically, to take care of them. Even for the establishment of such a system, we need more than these physical eyes. We need to see through the eyes of our intellect and mind. And that is important because seeing only helps to see things the way they are functioning in the world around us. But we have to develop our insight, our vision, our outlook. If we expand this aspect further, we can easily see that human life is much more than a mere physical existence. The human body occupies limited space on the planet, but our intellect can encompass the whole planet and its issues. And this is where we require that sight for which we need the light of Wahi. The issue here is that if this is the purpose of our creation and we fail to see this purpose, then are we blind or not? And that is an important point for us to keep in mind as we go through these explanations under this verse. Because we have to look at it from this aspect, that what exactly the Quran is calling blindness in this life. Now, continuing further, at a fundamental level, without the guidance of Wahi, how many people are fully aware of all the consequences of their actions in the world on fellow human beings? For example, if someone kills due to driving recklessly, does he know all the effects this will have on the family around him and beyond? Each human being killed in Gaza is impacting how many around them and the wider world. For example, those who can see and relate to them, it affects them too, even if the effect is invisible. And that is very important because all of this is affecting the psyche of everyone, whether somebody supports what is going on in Gaza or somebody is not supporting. And of course, the one who is seeing that what is going on over here, using the permanent values, the impact on them is totally different. And then they question that why is it happening? And we all get the answer, it is happening because there is no system of deen established anywhere on the planet. This is why the Quran factually declares, Kana nasu ummatan wahidatan. Mankind was meant to be one ummah. Because all are human beings and all of them are going to die at some point in time. And all of them going to have a life in the hereafter. And all of them are supposed to develop themselves so that they can live a better life here as well as in the hereafter. And if we fail to come to grips with that, that means we are blind, inverted commas, and our life will end with death. And then we will not have any more chance to develop ourselves. By relating this blindness to the development of the human self, all those doubts disappear which are related to human forgiveness, paradise, hell, the life of the hereafter and its nature, religious beliefs and rituals, the higher purpose of human creation, the injustices created by man-made systems, or physical death. We are enabled to see very clearly through the vision acquired through this self-development. Because all of these aspects, if we are not clear about them, then essentially we are blind about them. And that means we will not be able to get best out of our own self and our own life. How do we acquire this new vision? Is this a simple matter or is it a very complicated procedure such as obtaining a PhD in medicine, engineering, or nuclear physics? It is in fact far easier as it only requires study of the Quran, one book, with the desire, and that is important, with the desire, need, and aim to work for the system of deen. We should be questioning the world around us to develop this vision, this outlook, and then see that what is going on in the world, and despite being the beneficiary of the system, we have to reject the man-made system and say, I don't like the slavery of this system, I want more freedom. And then Quran's verses will start making sense. Now, continuing to explore this verse further, the Quran declared the unguided life devoid of its guidance as being equivalent to living under layers of darkness. What are these darknesses which need to be illuminated by its light? These are the darknesses created by unbridled human desires and emotions within the human psyche, and which are then projected onto the external world through human deeds. We have gone through these aspects previously as well. It's good to remind ourselves that we are born with certain weaknesses, certain vulnerabilities and limitations. We went through it under Shaitan and Iblis, and then we have to make efforts to overcome these proclivities within us. Now, over here, I have quoted a very famous verse. وَلَقَدْ زَرَعْنَا لِجَهَنَّمَ كَثِيرًا مِنَ الْجِنِّ وَالْإِنسِ لَهُمْ قُلُوبٌ لَا يَفْقَهُونَ بِهَا وَلَهُمْ أَعْيُنٌ لَا يُبْصِرُونَ بِهَا وَلَهُمْ آذَانٌ لَا يَسْمَعُونَ بِهَا أُولَٰئِكَ كَالْأَنْعَامِ بَلْ هُمْ أَضَلُّ أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْغَافِلُونَ. Many are the jinns and ins, and we know jinns are the nomads and people living away from the established habitations. The ins are those who live in urban areas. We are made for hell. They have hearts wherewith they understand not, eyes wherewith they see not, and ears wherewith they hear not. They are like cattle, nay, more misguided, for they are heedless. All this is based on evidence. The state of the world in 2024 is proof of this state of mankind. It's very interesting. What I've done over here is highlighted two aspects. First is they don't see through their eyes, which obviously means they don't have vision. Otherwise, they can see around. Ulaika kal aname. First Quran says that they are like animals. Of course, they are physical beings. But since they do not use all of these potentials, all of these abilities given to them, hence they become worse than animals. Another verse sums it up. فَإِنْ يَسْتَجِيبُ لَكَ فَاعْلَمْ أَنَّمَا يَتَّبِعُونَ أَهْوَاهُمْ وَمَنْ أَضَلُّ مِمَّنْ تَبَعَ هَوَاهُ بِغَيْرِ هُدًى مِّنَ اللَّهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَهْدِي الْقَوْمَ الظَّالِمِينَ. But if they do not respond to you, which means to the messenger, and in our case will be that if we have learnt the Quran and then we invite someone, that means that if they don't respond to the Quran, know that they only follow their own unbridled desires, and who is more astray than one who follows his own lusts, devoid of guidance from Allah. For Allah guides not people resorting to injustice. And there is a very finer aspect over here that if people are doing wrong, and if we present them the Quran, then they realize immediately, then they will have to give up all those injustices. And they will think hard and say, this Quran is not for them because they do not wish to give up their unbridled desires. A few comments on verses quoted in previous slide. These two verses which I quoted in the previous slide, so these comments are related to that. If we look at these translations, it appears as if Allah is condemning these people. Not at all. Sometimes people do mind as well, because a friend of mine narrated this, quoted this verse, and the other person got annoyed that you are calling me an animal. And whereas Quran is not saying that, Quran is stating the factual position of our psyche, the position of ourself. So we should not mind it. We should look at it factually, that what Quran is saying is for our own benefit. That if we do not bring out our best, our latent potentials, then who is the sufferer? It is me. With this kind of thought arising in our minds, we may wonder, why did Allah create such human beings in the first place who are not going to listen to His guidance and thus turn His planet into a hell? And if these kind of thoughts arise in our mind, despite being students of the Quran, then we should counter it. We should direct our attention to this side, that after all, we as being the students of the Quran were in a previous position where we were unguided and we did not have the benefit of the Quran. And if we have changed and we have opted to become better human beings and accepted the Iman in the Quran, then that means others will also do at some point. Not all, but there is a good chance that many will do, and that means a Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen will emerge who can then go towards making efforts to establish the system of Deen. Because this is the way system is. By keeping in mind the context of human creation, we should view these verses as the condition of a human self which is unwilling to use his choice for a higher purpose of his life. If individuals do not wish to consider the option of desiring a life beyond death despite possessing all these cognitive faculties, then this is the state of their self in which they end up as per the law of requital of Allah. Because they have made their own choices. If somebody hasn't been given the message of the Quran, his case is slightly different. But those who do receive this message, and they have books in their the copies of the Quran in their own home, and they do not question what is going on in the world and then try to come to the Quran or ask someone, then obviously they will suffer. These verses are for the guidance of the Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen who have grown beyond these limitations, thus confirm the purpose of the human creation and the universe. Because once we have come to the Quran and accepted Iman, then those things which were in darkness now have come into light, and we can start seeing those aspects of our life which were not visible to us clearly. For a student of the Quran who has accepted Iman and sees the benefit of it, there is the need to understand that these people do not want the life of the hereafter, which is detailed in the book. This leads to a state of perceived intellectual confrontation within society, which we are meant to deal with effectively. The Quran helps to acquire the psyche of a mu'min, which becomes strengthened gradually as it progresses on this path. Some possible reasons for not finding appeal in the Quranic guidance. Being the beneficiary of man-made systems, being fearful of giving up some of those immediate conveniences of life. And we do experience it, that people, when they are given this message, they think over it, and then some of them, in fact, are courageous enough to say that this is not for me, but others just move away and ignore it. Absence of sympathy and empathy for yatim and miskeen in the world. It's a big reason. If people cannot see poverty, deprivation, exploitation, child abuse, and all types of evil which is going on, that means they are not seeing, inverted commas. They are not using their intellect and reasoning to see what is going on in the world. They are not fully aware of what is going on in the world. If of a religious mindset, then holding this belief that these poor are meant to be there and giving charity to them by the rich guarantees the rich a place in heaven. This is a emotive feel-good factor. And I have come across these kind of utterances by people. They say that. And one is surprised that how can they say that? Next point is strong conviction that human life ends with physical death. Human beings are just the product of an evolutionary process which somehow helped to evolve these humans along with other animals. There is no purpose to their existence, just live physically, enjoy this life, and die, period. Those who are poor are made to believe that their fate is predetermined. That is, it is written in their taqdeer. And the clergy supported by the rich and powerful strengthen this belief of theirs. This is also reinforced by obeying the path of forefathers. Now, the next point is man-made systems are accepted as a fait accompli, and people do not question it, and they think this is the way life is supposed to be, thinking that these cannot be changed as there is no alternative system to replace it with. Then this attitude, why should I or we do it? And that is another hindrance. A lot of people say that, why should I do it? My life is okay, and why I don't care about others. And when they say or think that why I don't care about others, that means they are blind to that aspect, and that is the end of their self-development. Let someone else deal with the mess. Now, continuing on the verse 1772, people like to conform to the majority around them because if they stand up against all the wrongs, then they are likely to be persecuted by this majority who holds power through sheer numbers. Once people get used to the inertia of a wrong system, they do not wish to break the status quo. Humans can justify every wrong and can provide endless arguments to support capitalism, communism, theocracy, democracy, political parties, religious sectarian beliefs, etc. Because their interests are linked to these. Here, interest does not mean to be only materialistic. Even by conforming to these false ideologies, human beings find intellectual satisfaction. For example, being associated with power satisfies their egos. And this is the huge weakness that people want to be closer to those who have acquired power, never mind how they have acquired power, because that satisfies their own egoism, their own inner psyche. For example, and we see that soldiers will willingly lay down their life for the sake of nationalist or religious fervor. All this takes place because of the willful blindness of those who have power and control of world affairs. And how important is our physical life and the sense of self preservation or the instinct of self preservation which is kept within us. People don't want to die. But for these nationalist feelings or for religious reasons, people are willing to lay down their very precious life without getting anywhere near to self development. So they are providing proof for their own blindness in this life. To do anything in life, we should feel a need and desire. Then we create an incentive for this, and through motivation, we rise up and start doing this. Without desire and motivation, we cannot accomplish any given task. I put down some of these thoughts over here so that as students of the Quran, we observe, and it will help us to train ourselves and educate ourselves, and we gain additional experience. Now, over here, I've drawn a simple schematic. Human life is one continuity. Using the eyes to live this life, plus vision created intellectually without the Quranic values to acquire the benefits of physical life. So this blue arrow indicates that life which is spent without the guidance of the Quran. This vision helps to achieve all those successes defined by the man-made systems. This vision ends with physical death, cannot be used in the life hereafter, no vision for the hereafter, hence people like that who live their life without the guidance are blind. Physical death, and that is the end of life. Physical eye is not required here, no Quranic vision, hence will be blind. So if we take this part of the schematic as hereafter, then these human beings haven't got that vision which is now required to go through this part of their life. Using the eyes to obtain data and employing the permanent values to create a Quranic vision to analyze and evaluate the world. Because once we acquire this Quranic vision, we can see that even in this life, we accrue higher benefits because we are able to see the darknesses which exist in various parts of the world and in the life of various individuals or human beings. And evaluate the world, draw benefits of worldly life within these values. And that does not mean that we don't get the material successes. Material successes is part of it. The only thing is that we seek those material successes within the permanent values. Physical eyes are not needed after death. Quranic vision to continue beyond physical death will help to evolve further. Physical death, end of one phase of life, self will experience it and move forward. And we remember Quran says, Kullun nafsun zaikatul maut, that every nafs, every self will experience their own death. Acquired vision in previous stage of life will keep brightening the Sirat-e-Mustaqim. And there is a verse from Surah Al-Hadid, Yawma taral mu'minina wal mu'minate yas'a nuruhum baina aydihim. One day you will see the mu'min men and women, how their light runs forward in front of them. So if we acquire that vision which the Quran has asked us to acquire, then we are able to see even in this life, much before our death, that what is going on in the world and how the system of Deen can materialize through our efforts. Next verse, 1773, never abandon the path defined by the Quran. وَإِنْ قَادُوا لَيَفْتِنُونَكَ عَنِ الَّذِي أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْكَ لِتَفْتَرِيَ عَلَيْنَا غَيْرَهُ وَإِذًا لَاتَّخَذُوكَ خَلِيلًا. Since obedience to one Allah is severely repugnant to these people, hence they had resolved that by somehow or other diverting you from the path of Wahi to make you agreeable to making a compromise with them, and by accommodating their view to invent something from your own side and present this as the Wahi of Allah. And they had decided that if you acquiesce to this, then they will become your friends. And we experience these. A lot of people feel that what is being presented through the Quran is very rigid, very strict, very precise, and we should make some accommodation in it, some concession, some allowance. And over here, Quran has cautioned us. Further reflections. This verse cautions us about distractions on this path of the Quran, where these can arise from people from whom we have moved away, and or these thoughts may arise within our hearts and mind. And these thoughts can arise in our own hearts and mind as well, that if we can make some allowance over here and move away from the permanent values of the Quran, we can draw some benefits and we will keep our social relations with our friends and relatives. We experience this kind of behavior and conduct during our journey on this path called Sirat-e-Mustaqim. And Quran has repeatedly drawn our attention to it, that on this path, you cannot simply compromise. And for that, Quran presents the model of Hazrat Ibrahim, where he told his friends, he told his family, he told his father, everyone, that unless you come to the path of Wahi, there is a clear line of differentiation between you and me. Here the Quran has guided us that haqq simply cannot compromise. For example, the fact is that 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. If we compromise and say that 2 plus 2 can be 3.9 or 4.1, then we have left the path of haqq and will be on the path of batil. The Quran tells us that if people do not see the yatim and miskin in the word and do not wish to do something about it as part of the system of deen, then they are not in the mode of gaining any guidance from the Quran. And there is a Surah Maun, I have quoted the top, the first verse, Araytallazi yukazzibu bid-deen, that who is falsifying deen. And then the next verses are that those who ignore yatim and miskin, they have no concern with yatim and miskin. They think doing few charitable works and performing some rituals is all that what is the demand of deen. Never mind how many rituals they perform. So Quran says they falsify deen through their own conduct. It amounts to this, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu lima taquluna ma la taf'alun, and which means that addressing mu'mineen and Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen, that don't say things which you are not going to do, and which also means do things and then let people know that you are a man of action. You are not just heart words. See, it is addressed to mu'mineen. It may appear to be a bit harsh, and these verses appear to be harsh initially till the time we are well settled on Sirat-e-Mustaqim. But if we analyze it in the light of our practical experience under man-made systems across the world, the reality becomes glaringly obvious that these systems continuously create inequality, conflicts, imbalances, wars, exploitation, injustices, and divisions in the world. And we can see in the last 1 year or so how the law of requital has accelerated itself, how the events are taking place so quickly. Every night, every morning we get up and in the world there is something wrong which is going on. The Quran helps to identify all these aspects and presents before us another choice, i.e., acquire this new vision which can see the reality of the man-made world and then start following this new path with this new vision, together and united at heart. And we should relate it to the world around us, because just imagine that if we had not created this platform and we were not on this platform together and discussing these aspects, that would also have been a sort of a blindness. We wouldn't have understood some of these things which now we are understanding by coming together. Next verse, 1774. No aspect of the permanent values can be compromised. Walaula an sabbatnaka laqad kitta tarkanu ilayhim shay'an qalila. And there is no doubt in this that their tricks were so deep that if complete conviction in the truth of Wahi had not established your feet firmly, and you had also kept this transitory benefit before you like them, then it is possible that you may have inclined towards them somewhat. Beautifully, Quran has cautioned us, warned us that these kind of thoughts will arise in your heart. Recognize these, and previous mu'mineen also experienced it, so you are nothing new. But Allah is with you, His laws are supporting you, so just stick to Sirat-e-Mustaqim. Expanding this verse a bit more, Why do human beings become prone to compromise? When they go for some immediate benefits in life, otherwise, if one is fully convinced of one's own destination, then nothing in the world can divert one from the correct path. This aspect is easy to follow in the physical world. For example, we are going somewhere and are sure about our direction. No one will be able to cast any our mind. We will know 100% that this train will take me to my intended destination. And in the physical world, it's easier. For example, if we are following Google Map and following satellite navigation, we know we will exactly reach our destination because we will not go astray. But in the world of psyche, in the world of thoughts, it's different because these thoughts arise. And for to counter these wrong thoughts or those thoughts which distract us, we have to go back to the permanent values which are laid before us as external criteria. So this aspect we should keep in mind. And that is why being together is very important. Then because Quran says, Watavaso bil haqqi, watavaso bis sabr, they guide each other on haqq as well as they tell each other that be patient, be strong, be steadfast on this path. In the case of the human psyche, doubts and suspicions can arise due to the impact of the overwhelming majority of people pursuing the man-made systems. On one side, there is merely the book of Allah and its words, and there is now no further messenger after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because no more messenger is coming. Now it is the book which is our guide, which is our imam, which is our model. We have to go through it pedantically, methodically, and then strengthen our own self. The Quran has quoted examples of various messengers to provide strength to us that if they could do it, then we too can do it. See how much confidence and trust Allah has in human beings, those human beings who come to this path and then stay on the Sirat al-Mustaqim, and how the Quran helps them to strengthen their hearts together. The Quran recognizes the frailties and vulnerabilities of the human thought process and guides us pedantically and methodically through this maze. We have already gone through some of the weaknesses and limitations of the human self, which is not yet exposed to the guidance of the Quran. Continuing to explore this verse, firstly, it tells us that the book of Allah is complete, finalized, and preserved for all times. Thus, the need for messengers to be sent from the direction of Allah has come to an end. And we can check it, we can verify it. Just see that all the work which Allama Pervez has done for establishing the system of deen, how helpful it is. He is not here, but reading through his books and making our own effort, we are able to develop our own self. It points to the fact that humanity collectively had reached that stage of intellectual development where it became free from the need for further messengers. It is developing further, and we can see that in today's world, if man wishes, he can understand the core message of the Quran within a shorter time scale than was required in the earlier era. This is the way human intellect evolves and develops. So there is a lot of encouragement for us. There is a lot of incentive for us that things are going in the right direction. And the modern means of communication are facilitating this tremendously. There are verses pointing to this fact. For example, Wal nashirate nashran, and Quran says, and scatter far and wide. So news, information is being shared widely now. What happens few hours ago is on the social media for all of us to find out and share it. Secondly, it tells us that the laws of Allah do not change, and if we acquire Iman the way we are guided to in the Quran, then it will lead to acquiring firm conviction that results will start to manifest within our psyche. So we live in a very exciting world in which changes are taking place, and all these changes are for the good of spreading the message of Allah. We will be able to discern this change clearly through the signs noted in the Quran. This is not otherworldly, it is very much about this world in which we physically live. Continuing on this verse, thirdly, when this Iman finds its place in the folds of our heart and mind, then the need will arise to seek those others who are on this path. And by coming together, education, training, and self-development will start to take shape. This will bring about further development in the human self, and gradually various aspects of the system of deen will keep becoming clearer. And this change will act as a sign of the truth of the Quran. Fourthly, it is only possible if the hearts are united after eliminating all elements of divisiveness. This will lead to acquiring that unity of thought and action, which is a prerequisite on this path of Allah. Fifthly, as there is no messenger, the Quran itself will assume the role of a guide. And that is a very important point of today's presentation. When I was looking through these verses, and particularly this verse, I came to this conclusion that we do not require any human being leading us. All of us are capable of leading our own self using the light of the Quran, then coming together and then making decisions together. So that the need for a leader, for a human being leading us is disappears. Because whenever people are put into these positions, some of them might become egoistic and then dictatorship might arise out of it. So that possibility can be totally eliminated, i.e., each and every challenge of life will be referred back to it individually and collectively so that we do not go astray. Because Quran itself, when it serves as a light, we don't need another human being. If we know every time faced with a problem, we go back to the Quran, come together and agree and then follow it. Because we know by going according to the Quran, we will never ever fail because Allah's laws with His presence will support us. This is that fact to which the Quran points our attention by stating, وَأَقَمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَ بَيْنَهُمْ. See, the Quran itself has explained the meaning of salat, that they established salat, the system of salat, by carrying out amruhum, their mutual affairs and matters, by coming together and deciding it through consultation. As part of the established system of salat, they settle their affairs through mutual consultation. And in that consultation, they stick to permanent values. They never ever go outside the permanent values, because outside the permanent values, they know is the boundary of hell, Jahannam. Concluding remarks on this verse. Sixthly, they never give up as they have fully grasped the importance of following the path defined by the laws of Allah, and seeing their success on this path becomes an evidence in itself. They are now fully exposed to the pleasure and joy associated with this newly acquired self, where the reality of human creation and its importance becomes evidently clear on each one of them. Next, they know that the results of their efforts have been clearly manifested so far on this path, and that Allah has promised that this will lead to the establishment of the system of Deen. They also know that since the state of affairs of man-made systems vary in every era, hence it is not possible to predict in which one the system of Deen will emerge. However, the bottom line is that the efforts on the path of Deen never go to waste, because Quran has very clearly stated, Inna Allaha la yudiyu ajra al-muhsinin. Surely Allah does not let the deeds of muhsinin go to waste. Now let's go to the next verse, 1775, following the path of the Quran without any fear. Izallah azkan azaknaka zayf al-hayate wa zayf al-mamate summa la tajidu laka alayna nasira. If supposing this had taken place, then we would have made you taste of a double punishment in this life and a double punishment after death also in life hereafter. And you would not have found any friend or helper against us. This is because your mistake would not only have destroyed you, it would also have become the cause for the destruction of the whole of humanity. Further reflections on this verse. It appears from the verse as if Allah is attempting to make us fearful of the double punishment so that we stay on this path of the Quran. Not at all. And that is very important, that we should not take these verses as some kind of creating fear within us. What Quran is saying is that the path we have selected for us in the light of the Quran, this is going to take us to that success which is forecasted in the Quran itself. So we should keep firmly on this path and have a firm iman that this path will take us to that destination which Allah as Rabb has defined within the Quran. We know that the Quran tells us that by following the formula of the Quran, we will become free from all kinds of fear and grief. We need to analyze this from the point of view of effects left on ourselves by transgressing the laws of Allah. The focus of attention of the Quran is the human psyche and its impact on making choices and decisions in our life. Since these decisions help to create the world around us, we need to analyze the impacts of both unjust and righteous psyches in the world around us. Here, the Quran has warned us by addressing the messenger that by compromising on any of the values of the Quran, you will fail to establish the system of deen. And this is also for us because we have opted to stay on this path because we don't like the man made system and we want it to be replaced by the system of deen. This means that all the tyranny and injustice which is going on around you will continue unabated, and the Quranic guidance will remain dormant, confined within its pages. And that is the state as of today. This will not manifest its cure. And Quran has very clearly said, Ya ayyuhan nasu qad ja'atkum mau'izatum min rabbikum wa shifa'un lima fi sudur wa hudam wa rahmatul lil mu'minin. We covered this verse in a great detail in one of our previous presentations. So Quran over here is addressing mankind that now surely this book has come to you, this instruction, this guidance has come to you from the side of your Rabb, which means that for the system of Rububiyat. And in this, there is a treatment for the hearts. That is, without the guidance, Quran says that these are diseased hearts. And it is a guidance and rahmat. Rahmat means all that development and nourishment and growth human beings get by becoming mu'mineen, lil mu'mineen. This cure needs willing human hands and intellect. Consequences of not obeying the Quran. If this system is not established, then firstly, you will not be able to benefit from the system of deen in this life, and humanity around you will continue to suffer. This individual and collective suffering, which is avoidable, will lead to not being able to manifest those latent potentials which are related to the system of deen. Not bringing out these potentials means that you will fail to acquire that self which leads to getting the help of Allah as per His law in this life. Secondly, over and above living in hell in this life, the absence of a new self within you will lead to no further development in the life of the hereafter. We all now know that Allah does not go against His laws, and there is no exception in this even for the messengers. Because messengers were also human beings like us, and if laws are applicable to them, the same laws are applicable to all of us. And if they could do it, we can do it too. Thirdly, by pointing out this aspect, the Quran has informed us that these kinds of thoughts may arise in your hearts and minds. Hence, be aware of them and counter them by thinking through the consequences of not following this path of Allah. And this thinking through the consequences of what we are doing, this is that acquired vision, acquired insight, which we acquire through the Quran, and we are not blind anymore. Do you wish to continue living in the Jahannam created by unbridled human desires, or would you prefer to follow this guidance under the direct supervision of the laws of Allah? Next verse 1776, let the law of requital deal with those who go against the guidance of the Quran. وَإِنْ كَادُوا لَا يَسْتَفِزُّونَكَ مِنَ الْأَرْضِ لِيُخْرِجُوكَ مِنْهَا وَإِذًا يَلْبَسُونَ خِلَافَكَ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. And the Jews, etc., of Medina had also made this resolve that you should be tormented so much that you also forsake this piece of land and go. If they had managed to do this, then after you, they too would not have had much respite. Their destruction would have arrived very quickly. And this happens even in today's world. And what is happening in Gaza is the same, that they are being pushed out of their land because people are more interested in the land and they don't want nuisance around of these human beings. But over here, of course, this is a Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen, and local Jews and other non-Muslims, they did not like their presence, and they did not like the message because they knew that it is gaining strength. So they wanted them to leave the place. Expanding it further, this is the tactic human beings used against those whom they view to be working against their interests. What could be a bigger challenge to the capitalist system than to talk about giving rights to yatim and miskeen and to point out the wrongs being committed under the man-made systems? And those who are committing wrong, they don't like to get any sermon regarding their being on the wrong path and asking them to forbid and to stop this and then come onto the right path. One extreme form of this repugnance to the message of Allah is to threaten Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen that they will be forced out of their abodes, that they will be forced to leave their homes. We can see this happening in the world to those who are weak, and it is taking place in the lands occupied by Muslims. And we can see all these visa and these kind of nationality issues are within the Muslim lands as well, that people who are coming from outside, they don't have any rights as compared to the people who are born within that land, which is totally against the Quran. In the case of Bani Israel, they wished to leave the place while Pharaoh would not allow them to go. Why did he not allow them to escape from his regime? He wished to rule over them and wanted them to obey his laws rather than the laws of Allah. Hence, the reaction of people in power can be different. And in this case, Pharaoh did not allow them. In the case of the Messenger of Allah, people wanted them to leave Medina. And we should remain cognizant of this by carefully observing the trend of events around us. Another threat was to stone them to death. For example, I've quoted a verse over here, قَالُوا لَإِن لَمْ تَنْتَهِ يَا نُوحُ لَا تَكُونَنَّ مِنَ الْمَرْجُمِينَ. They said that if you do not stop, O Nuh, you will be the one to be stoned to death. Continuing this verse 1776, here the Quran has informed the Mu'mineen to not be concerned by this and let them know that if they manage to force you out of the area, then they themselves will not stay in their homes for very long either. This means that those striving on this path should be prepared to leave the place for the cause of Allah. In fact, the Quran has advised us, Ya ibadi alladhina amanu inna ardi wasi'atun fa'iyya fa'budun. O Mu'mineen, truly spacious is my earth, hence move to a place where laws can be obeyed. And this we should always keep in mind, not to stick ourselves to a particular land, a particular house. If there is a need to move, leave that place, we should leave and go to a place which is more suitable for the propagation of this message. An interesting point here is that since the Mu'mineen were not yet powerful enough, hence they were not asked to resort to fighting back or to plead to them to allow them to remain there. And this is an important point which came to my mind, that Allah is not asking them to fight back, to protest against it. What all Allah is saying is that remain firm for the time being, and if the situation comes, then you can leave, and then the law of requital will take care of the rest. They are told that you may succeed in turning us out, but ultimately success will come in our way as per the law of requital. And historically, then Muslims became very strong, and then they were given permission to fight back. So we have to look at the circumstances in which we are living and never be impulsive, never react. And we should think through the issues very rationally using the Quranic guidance. The point to remember in today's world is to be aware of the scenario which may develop in the future, and we need to remain vigilant regarding this and bear in mind that قَدْ نَعْلَمُ إِنَّ لَا يَحْزُنكَ الَّذِي يَقُولُونَ فَإِنَّهُمْ لَا يُكَذِّبُونَكَ وَلَكِنَّ الظَّالِمِينَ بِآيَاتِ اللَّهِ يَجْحَدُونَ. We know indeed the grief their words cause you. It is not you they falsify, it is the signs of Allah which these unjust ones falsify. So their battle is with Allah. We are carrying out the duty on behalf of Allah. So we should keep that in mind, that because work hasn't been done towards the system of Deen for the last many centuries, so there will be at least intellectual difficulties on this path. But we should remain firmly on this. Now, last verse of today's presentation, 1777. Keep reminding with this fact that the laws of Allah are immutable. Sunnata man kad arsalna qablaka min rusulina wala tajidu li sunnatina tahwila. In any case, whatever is happening to you, this is not something new. People harassed all the messengers we sent before you in the same way, and our modus operandi in their case has been that when their transgression reached to an extreme and no possibility remained of their reformation, then that nation became destroyed. The same procedure will also be applicable here. Our laws and procedures are immutable. You will never find any alteration in them. And the beauty of the Quran is that after giving instructions to Mu'mineen and for our guidance, then Quran, Allah goes back and assures them that you are not alone. Whole of this thing is following certain laws which are given in the Quran. All these permanent values are defining the whole of this procedure. So as long as you remain within them and stay firm, then success will come in your way. Further reflections. Continuing from the previous verse, the Quran informs us that this opposition by those with vested interests is not something new. This happened to previous messengers of Allah, i.e., whoever stood up and passed the message on. The people in power did not like it as it went against the status quo. The status quo is not acceptable to the law of evolution of Allah. Human beings soon get fed up with the former systems which create problems, and they wish to stand up against such corrupt systems which benefit the few. However, this is related to the trial and error method of evolution. In the case of the Quran, the procedure is slightly different. In this case, a Jamaat rises based on Iman and Saleh deeds and makes the Book of Allah their Imam, and by keeping its value system as an external standard, resolves to tread on this path. It never gives up and makes sustained efforts to seek guidance from the Quran. Since human intellect has reached that stage of comprehension in the world where it does not need another human being to provide it with guidance, hence the Quran can serve as a guidebook in its own right. And we do not need the leadership of a figurehead in front of us, because the whole need for a human being is eliminated here. And there is no barrier between the Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen, who is trying to establish a system of deen, and Allah, and they seek guidance collectively from the Quran. In this way, we eliminate the possibility of any human being becoming an ilah or God. This is part of the training to totally eliminate the need for a human being. The Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen will manage affairs using the Quran and will serve as witnesses on each other, and as a group will be witnesses on the affairs of the system. And Allah through the Quran will be witness on all of them. Finally, the laws of Allah do not change, and we need to take advantage of this fact. The beauty of the Quranic guidance is that once we acquire that precise Iman, then we willingly follow this path, as we have totally abandoned the man-made system intellectually. This is what is stated in this verse 2. We remember this is La ikraha fid din, i.e., having recognized both paths of life, we give up the path of Taghut and take the path of the Quran. Any thoughts and doubts which arise to sow seeds of division or dissension, we recognize these and reject them as distractions and continue proceeding on this path of deen. We stick to our side of our covenant with Allah and have firm conviction that the laws of Allah will help us to achieve our goal. And last, this is what the Quran tells us, and this commitment is not otherworldly, but is very much for this life, as life is one continuity which never breaks into two. To conclude, Quran says, Inna allazina qalu rabbuna Allahu summa istaqamu tatanazzalu alayhimul malaikatu. In the case of those who say our Rabb is Allah and further stand straight and steadfast, the malaika, that is the forces, the psychological forces within themselves, and of course, if they're making use of the external forces, all of these, firstly, they understand them and then they make use of them, descend on them. Hence, if we acquire the vision of the Quran, then we are not blind anymore, and we should keep moving forward using its light. And that is important, that we make sure that we are not blind to what is given in the Quran and do our best as much as possible and create that kind of an incentive or motivation within us that this system of deen can materialize in our life. And that is the way we should leave this planet. Thanks for your time and for sharing this today. Please feel free to share it with your contacts. You may like to subscribe for future talks related to the Quranic system of deen. Thank you.